If you have a Briggs 206 or you're thinking of getting one, this show is for you. My name is James McMahon, and I'm your host for KartPulseLIVE today. Stay tuned, we've got a great show for you. Our guest today is David Klaus from Briggs Racing. He's the director of their 206 program, which is under their branch of Briggs Stratton Racing. We're going to talk a little bit about that 206 program today and go into some details about some updates and just generally talk about the program, its origination, and what the future holds for it. Most importantly, or secondly importantly, you will have a chance to win a 206, which is pretty decent. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our future shows. And also check out the hashtag KartPulseLIVE to see past episodes. So let's get on with the show. And we're going to bring on David Klaus from Briggs Stratton Racing. Welcome, David.
Thanks, James. Glad to be here. Thanks
for joining us. So, David, you're a lifetime karter, as we've discussed, and also the director of Briggs Stratton Racing. Tell us a little bit more about how you came across kart racing, how you got started.
Honestly, James, I kind of stumbled into it. Growing up, it started how a lot of kids do. We found an old engine that the neighbor was throwing out on a tiller, and we ended up, me and my next door neighbor, we grabbed it off, and our first go-kart was made out of wood. And then my parents and the neighbor got pretty scared for us because it was pretty poorly put together. And then the next thing you know, my dad brought home what turned out to be an early Margate kart. And so that was one of my first go-karts. My dad and I, we worked together, we rebuilt it. And even though I didn't competitively race, we had a college in our backyard, and all the neighborhood kids every weekend, we spent the entire day, sun up till sundown, doing time lapse against one another. So I didn't get into competitive racing until I stumbled backwards into working at Briggs Stratton, and that's when kind of the door opened.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Happened around the same time.
Yes.
Oh, we're getting a little bit of feedback on your audio there. If you can turn your volume down a little bit.
Sure.
Sorry. Maybe I'm just loud.
No
Thank
problem.
you. Yeah, so I did have a question for you. So you started off with wooden carts, just building your own, like playing around, and then moved on to strapping motors on?
That's basically what happened. We were dinking around, and my dad and my neighbor thought it would be better if we were a little more legit and safe.
Right. So how did you end up working for Briggs Stratton?
So I'm from outside of Chicago, ended up going to Marquette University, and got an internship at Briggs Stratton. So I worked there for a summer, and then the very next summer, my sophomore year, I got my resume in late. My boss at the time, Dan Wilson, who was the director of Briggs Racing, got his request in late for intern, and the stars aligned. He sent me an email saying, how'd you like to fire off this racing thing? And so why not? It was a great experience, and obviously 25 years later, it's something I still have an incredible passion for. And honestly, what I got out of it as a kid, I love to see something that hopefully can be passed on to a father and son, father and daughter. It was great memories, and even to this day, a lot of my best friends come out of karting.
That's awesome. So fast forward about 15 years and the advent of the program. Why?
Well, 206 program I actually put on paper in 2003 or 2004. And at that time, there was actually a lot of pushback from the field to not bring out a sealed engine. In fact, it actually got to the point where several of our dealers got together and said they would boycott our program if we brought it out. And, you know, as horrible as the downturn was of the economy in 2009, it gave us an opportunity to release the engine. And it was something, you know, karting, any form of motorsports, over time, if you look at the Raptor engine, what it turned into from what it started to be, what it began as. The animal, how quickly that accelerated. Just too much complexity, too much cost, very unnecessary. And if you look, people don't have the mechanical skill set that they used to have. We have to make karting simpler for people to get involved. And, just based off of some of the feedback from my new employees would come in, be so excited to get their son or daughter into karting. And then about a week later, I'd watch that smile be gone. And I'd take the time to go up and ask them, what's the issue? And more times than not, it's where do you get started? How do you get started? There's a million chassis. There's it's this engine, which cam, which springs, what builder. It's overwhelming right at the start of the sport. So to come out with something that was turnkey, that would allow somebody to open a box and experience the competitiveness of karting day one, was something that I really wanted to do. And we always had the product. I mean, if you look, the animal engine is the 206. Yes, our tolerances are tighter. The way we build it is slightly different, but it's the same base engine. So why did we have to take the cam out? Why do we have to go to aftermarket springs, go to a billet rod, and all the other stuff that simply adds cost and more variables? So, you've got, a separation, you just got variance in power. So I wanted something simple that we could bring out that people could have fun and be competitive. And it took, honestly, the engine out of the equation, which is hard to say for an engine manufacturer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a difficult challenge. It takes a lot of commitment, and really, there's probably not a whole lot of money in it either. But I think the problem in a way is that some folks get a little bit confused as to where the place of the 206 might be. They kind of go to an extreme point and they're like, oh, it's going to, kill the business for engine builders, and teams aren't going to be able to afford. And, the way I see it is the 206 program at the very least is the best way that we can present kart racing for the modern customer. Like you said, they're looking for simplicity. They're looking for some parity, and they just want to have a good experience when they get started so they can just turn laps and have fun. And, the 206 kind of matches that. And then as they move on, then they might move to something else, or they can continue to be competitive with the 206. But nonetheless, the idea is that it's made simple and it's made fun. It's easy to have fun. Whereas with some other classes that we've had over the years, unless you're a complete masochist like me, it's difficult to have fun. Like, not everybody wants to push start a kart. I don't mind it, but not most people are kind of into that thing. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, you mentioned engine builders, and initially, and maybe still today, there's some pushback from various groups on the 206 program, because it tends to kind of proactively alleviate some issues for people who are especially getting started in the sport. So talk a little bit about that. I guess it's a bit of a cat and mouse game maybe in some ways. What, as part of the Briggs program, like what you guys have in place right now to kind of keep ahead of the curve and maintain the integrity and the parity of the program from this point out?
Well, James, I've stated this in past writings, but we're very active in when we hear something from the field of chasing it down. And that means we probably average $10,000 to $15,000 worth of purchases of engines and parts just to see what is happening downstream, to see if there's any credibility to it. And we're also constantly tightening our tolerances and improving our product at the same time. So in terms of the cat and mouse game, the majority of what we see is either blatant cheating. Obviously, with tech, you would catch that. But 9 times out of 10, it comes down to smoke and mirrors and voodoo magic. So there's nothing there in terms that would precipitate a rule change to what we have. So we've got an incredibly solid foundation. Our tooling, the way we manufacture is consistent to our own product. We're not sharing tooling with volume manufacturing. The other thing that most people probably don't understand is all the way back to how we cast our cylinder. It starts with a casting technique, and most people don't understand it. And I guess the easiest way I can explain it is, take a Chinese engine. Some will be screamers and some will be complete turds. If you actually took that cylinder and x-rayed it, you'll see what's different between a volume mass-produced product where speed is cost effectiveness to the way we do it. I mean, the approach that we cast our cylinder gives us a uniform density. And, not to give away too many trade secrets, but in our world, uniform density, especially around the cylinder, if you have porosity behind that sleeve, right, when that engine heats up, you're losing ring seal. And ring seal variance ends up to performance variance. So all the way down to the way we cast our cylinder is unique. When you look at our cylinder head, single casting, and every year I'm throwing away an average of $25,000 worth of tooling that has 90% plus of its life left. In the real world, you never do that. In our world, if you're going to do it right, that's what you need to do to be vested, to be able to build an engine that somebody can take out of the box and be competitive. So those are the little things. And then, so obviously it's how we build it. We have to have a consistent product. And then we also watch it all the way through to the end consumer to see if there's any truth to a rumor and so forth. So we're very active in the marketplace.
Awesome. So one of the things that's unique about the 206 is the seal. And talk a little bit about its purpose and its role, because it's just the bottom end that's sealed, not the top end. So talk more about that. Why have it? And do you think it adds value to the program and prevents some of the, as we say, the pixie dust magic that happens sometimes?
I think it definitely does. I mean, the beauty of our program is the bottom end, bore stroke, and cam profile. If you would get into the bottom end, I mean, here's the simple reality, and this is a hard one to understand. You would basically be putting the exact same cam in, and then the other trick would be to take away spring pressure. But if you look at how we built the engine, again, this is, what do we have? 10 years worth of testing, thousands and thousands of hours to build this engine around. So with that knowledge, the tricks that somebody would do to the bottom end would never show up in the range that we're working on. So the seal is a quick check. It simplifies our program, but you can check the bottom end, the critical components, without having to go any further than that. So yeah, the seal is important, but in some respects, it's to help prevent people from being their own worst enemy. If the seal wasn't on it, the first thing that would happen is you got to take this engine to 30 over. You got to let me line bore it. You got to do all those tricks. And the simple reality is, anybody that's worked on our engine knows the perpendicularity of it is pretty remarkable. So that's again all pixie dust, but it allows the upsale.
Right. And I think there's always there's definitely scope for for folks again who are not mechanically inclined or just don't have the time or want to deal with it. It certainly doesn't hurt to have somebody go over the motor mounted on your chassis and run it once or twice. I think some of, like you say, some of the pixie dust, I mean, I think sometimes you could almost put a sticker on a Briggs 206, and if it wins, somebody's gonna want whatever that sticker says,
Sure.
Even if it said soiled underwear motors or something like that. And I think that's just a universal law of racers, being racers. You see something, and whether it's a rational thought or not, you look at it and go, well, they've got something different, whether it's a different fuel setup, different fuel routing, or a sticker, you tend to kind of gravitate towards it. So what can you tell us about what is done to the animal before it leaves as a 206 at Briggs? What is it specifically that you guys, that you're able to disclose goes towards its parity when it's leaving this factory?
I think, James, we're probably spending the average of 30 minutes an engine just measuring parts. So everything from the center line of the crank to the top of the deck, piston pin to the crown, stroke, these are all measured. I mean, we're hand building every engine to a level of precision that you have to put in that amount of time to do that. So we're measuring everything from pressure checking the bottom end to running a power test before it goes out the door. Every engine is ran before it leaves. So some of the same tools that are used in the field of tech, we're using those tools when we're building the engine as the final verification. And then before that, you've got 2 layers of checks before it even gets into what do I want to say, in line to go into our production. So there's a lot of different checks. Every time we get a batch of cylinders or rods, we go as far as x-raying them. We need to make sure that the density is there, that there's no variance, that our casting techniques stay the same, and so forth. So there's just a ton of checks. We sonic wash the critical internal parts for a second time right before we build the engine. So there's a lot of steps that we do. And then the build sheet. For us, that build sheet is that independent step on each engine that we verify our build as we go along. But to our racer, we want them to see the quality of the product that we're building, so that hopefully we can, some of the pixie dust we can blow away. There isn't good, better, and best. Every one of our carburetors, we wet flow at 8 different set points. I think you might have problems finding anybody else that would go to that effort, especially at our price point. But we just don't want the good, better, and best. Every carburetor is within 0.5% off a master carburetor for flow. Otherwise, it's scrapped. We don't rework it. So, that's the beauty of our program.
I got a question from our audience here. Joe Emmons is asking how many 206s are built per year?
That's not going to be one, Joe, I'm going to answer. And it purely comes down to this. That's kind of a competitive tidbit on volume. I'll say our average build is 25 to 50 engines a day. And we'll leave it at that. So we scale up in off season, and then we also can shrink down. So, there's a lot of flexibility in how we build the engine.
Yeah. And Todd Helmick asks about the red marker. I know this has come up before. I think there's a video on this one, right?
Yeah, there is.
Tell us more about that.
So the red marker, if you took an engine apart, James, what you would see is really all our call-outs and measurements. From the piston pop-up, it's marked on the cylinder. If you took the head off, you'll see a minus or plus because we're measuring the center line of the crank to the top of the deck. If you pull the crankshaft off, you'll see what the stroke variance is right on the crank itself. Depth of the combustion chamber written right on the head. So those are all some of the checks we do as we're building the engine.
Awesome. Ray Massey Jr. with a question here. Do you have any pointers for first-year 206 sportsmen coming out of the Comer Kid Kart class? We could probably both take a stab at that, Dave. Why don't you go first?
Boy, I'm a bigger picture guy. Have fun. Don't push your kid. Let them learn. Understand that next step. He's going to be stepping up against kids that have years more experience. So take a deep breath, hook up with a kid or two at the front, learn the line, but just have fun. It'll come with seat time. Seat time's everything.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Keep it simple, keep it fun, and depending on your experience level with the Comer and how comfortable the driver is, luckily the 206 kind of makes it a little bit more stress free. Comer or any two-stroke. Don't get me wrong, I love two-strokes, but in my experience and opinion, they are more work. I love doing that work. Some people don't, and that's just kind of a personal preference at the end of the day. But I think you'll find that the Briggs will serve you well, and you'll be able to work on developing your driver. I'm going to give a shout out to our forums.kartpulse.com. If you have any questions, come along, post in the forums. We've got some great experienced guys and parents that can give you lots of pointers, and we can talk about where your driver is right now and kind of where you want to get him. But the most important thing is have fun and make it a learning experience for both of you. That's what I've been trying to do with my kid. She's 9 now, and she's not really into racing, but she really wants to work with karts and wants to drive them. So she's actually restoring a vintage kart with me, and we're going to hopefully get that out on the track later this year. Now, of course, after talking, I've completely lost my point. I don't know what I was going to say. I'm going to bring you back on here, Dave.
Welcome to my world.
Oh, here's a really good one from Andrew Handler. How do you convince stockholders to let you build something that does not really need to be replaced?
Wow, that's a great one, Andrew. I'll tell you why. It's real simple. We do the right thing, and good things happen. That's kind of the basis. The beauty of Briggs Racing is this isn't a profit center for us, and it allows us to put that kind of investment into this product line. And how we would justify it on the most basic level is the exposure we get. A big company like Briggs & Stratton, this not being the core entity of our business, we can look at the exposure we get from being in everything from off-road trucks to snowmobiles and so forth, and you can put a dollar amount to that. So I think very few people understand that we lose a significant amount of money most years, and our sales go right back into fueling our programs. So when you buy a part from us, your weekly racing series program, which we just launched again with $45,000 worth of prizes for clubs around the United States and Canada. That's where that money goes. So awesome. It's a beautiful thing. We're blessed. We've got all the technology of a huge company, all the support, but we're not driven on making a profit. So that allows us to do the right thing first.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see if you're comfortable talking, but I'll ask you this question anyway. Briggs & Stratton Racing is related to, but is not quite the same as Briggs & Stratton, if that's correct. It's a branch, if you will, of that. So is that accurate to say that there's some degree of separation there, and that the Briggs & Stratton Racing program is primarily for the goodwill and for the promotion and branding of the Briggs & Stratton brand? Is that fair to say that?
Very fair. We're a division of Briggs & Stratton. If you looked at our revenue stream, when you look at, we're pushing a $2 billion company. It's motorsports is a rounding error, but that doesn't change the support that we get, doesn't change how passionate people are. And honestly, the bottom line, we've been involved in racing since the 1930s. And, Fred Stratton officially started the division in 1991 as a standalone, because, racing and the technology and what we've learned over, 80 plus years has been a wealth back to the rest of our product line. I talked about the way we do some of our castings. Well, in my world, that's uniform power. In the rest of our company's world, that's better emissions control. So when we have EPA emissions tiers, even how we go to cast, some of those small improvements go across the entire company. So pretty incredible what we give back to the company as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of, how a lot of larger brands leverage racing. It's used as a branding exercise, and that's not to diminish it in any way. It's still very important and part of the company, but also it's used to, use the learnings from that to develop their own internal processes, to develop their own internal products, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that's important to understand, because sometimes, you'll see the rhetoric of, big shareholder companies are, coming in to take over karting. It's like, well, yeah, that's not really what's going on. And I know you a bit of time now. I think you're reasonably honest. I trust you. And you've been around the sport long enough. I think that if it didn't mean anything to you, you wouldn't really be sticking around anymore. So as you said, you just relaunched, or for this year, we've relaunched the weekly racing series, 45K in prizes. Talk a little bit more about that, or any changes this year. I think last year there was about 2,800 senior drivers registered for it, which I think is pretty impressive. Any specific goals or new stuff for 2018 that we can expect?
More of the same. I mean, James, it's a solid program. I think we had 52 tracks, and I think 50 of them ended up with some incredible banquet prizes. So I mean, the wealth gets shared amongst all these tracks. And yes, I think we cleared right around 4,000 people participating. So that's pretty cool. We changed the mix of prizes a little bit, and that was simply because last year when we went to ship prizes, especially generators, think of how many storms we had back to back to back. And so when I went to pick prizes to ship out for banquet time to all our winners, our warehouses were empty. So I've changed the mix of prizes. So if storms come along, we'll still be able to deliver. So a lot more pressure washers than generators.
That's awesome. Yeah. So let me see. We got lots more comments than I can pick out of here. Dan Pelliziari, he noticed something I noticed when we spoke earlier this week, David. The motorcycles in the background, you got a pretty nice setup there, actually, if I don't say so myself. But Briggs moving into motorcycles, I thought they did a motorcycle thing a long time ago, but tell us more about that.
No, I mean, we're not moving into motorcycles. I think you're going to see Briggs Racing a little more in the sanctioned mini bike racing. That seems to be taking off. We just had a big event 2 weekends ago here, and I think it was JJ Flannery, two-time BMX bike gold medalist, X Games, won on a animal in the mini bike race. So no, it's a private passion more than anything. Motorcycles, small cars. I've got 3 in my living room here that I've collected over my life, and in the other room, my wife's pretty forgiving because I have a '66 BMW in the living room that I'm putting back together. So it's been there for over a year. So
yeah, I think you're a legitimate collector, man. You've got quite a few there. Ray McGibbon comments that the LO 206 training tech program we did at the OBKA swap meet was a great success. What are the plans to take it to the next level? And I know that that's something that has been also part of the program, is to try and give tech people the tools and the resources and the knowledge to consistently check the 206 program. So what is planned for that for this year? And we should probably answer Ray's question also.
Yeah, the OBKA swap meet, the tech program that was put on, Steve Vermeer and Greg Jasperson led it, which was great. I think we had 18 that participated. I mean, ultimately, and I put this in a blog last year, we're going to take it to the next level by incorporating it into our website. We're going to allow tech officials the ability to register and ultimately take online tests. We'll be able to create a database so that if we see something happening in the field or we make an update with the single click of an email, we can hit every tech official, across the world with an update. So we're going to have a dedicated section of our website that will be private register, but we'll focus on continuing that training that happened at the OVKA swap meet. and take it to the next level by being able to get that information out there. We'll do online video training. We'll have, we've got a Power Portal website to where we can do online education programs timed that everybody's required to take to remain active in our program. So just a continuing education on the tech side. We have to get more people, especially at a club level, up to speed with our program. Otherwise, all the effort we do, all the way down to how we cast the block is for nothing.
Right.
And so usually the sanctioning bodies used to drive that, but in today's world, that's just not happening. So we're stepping a little beyond our boundaries, but it's necessary. If we're going to help clubs continue to grow, we've got to give them the tools, and pun intended, and a way to control the program.
Right. No, I think it makes perfect sense. You know, you've got to take that approach because a lot of the clubs don't really have the resources. And of course, typically clubs are going to have to take at least 5-6 different types of engine. In your case, you know, you're obviously very familiar with the engine, having built it from scratch, and it gives you an opportunity to, you know, standardize that training and maintain the quality of the program and give clubs, you know, an easier path to make their tech more consistent, because that's a common complaint that we hear at club level and sometimes beyond it, that, you know, tech is inconsistent, because sometimes we're relying on volunteers that, you know, they mean the best, but they're trying to take, you know, 10 different kinds of engines, and, you know, the information on the tech of how to do it and the processes and the procedures is not exactly clear. So I think that's going to be a good thing for the Briggs program. It's going to help help kind of build on the program from the local level up to the, dare I say, you know, the national level. That's another topic. You know, why don't we talk a little bit about that when we talk about national races? And, you know, depending on how you look at it, there's a bit of a dichotomy between, you might say that the 206 is, for the most part, raced at the grassroots and local level. And then, of course, there's always a fear that by taking it, again, I'm going to use air quotes, national, that might damage the program in some way. And recently, we saw SCUSA at one of their events, I think it was at the Winter Nationals, and perhaps at the Suits of Lancaster last year, introduced a 206 class. So just kind of wondering what your thoughts are on that. Do you think it's, how do you approach that challenge of bringing in national level competition and national level resources and competitors, while also keeping it kind of still accessible and understandable at the local level?
I think, you know, when we originally launched the engine, it was focused at grassroots at the club level. Let's get people into racing, and from there you grow the bottom of the pyramid, and every level of racing grows and benefits in karting. You know, looking at where it's at, it's been on a national level for 5 years, and I think it's easy to see that the integrity of the program's maintained. I think the downside of the national level is you have a lot more people focused on the engine and really unscrupulous in some of their sales pitches. And that's where, you know, we need to up the ante on education and continue educating our consumer so they don't feel a need to buy into a sales pitch, because that's really all it is. After, you know, I'll give you a great example. You mentioned SCUSA. Well, the Winter Series Masters class, Eli Yanko ended up winning the championship. And he wrote me the Monday after and said, I just want to let you know that apparently I thought an engine would be faster without oil. And so, long story short, he forgot to put oil in the engine. Sorry, Eli, yeah. I didn't mean to call you out on that. But the bottom line is he ended up winning the championship again with an engine out of the box. And unfortunately, we hear that almost every weekend at that kind of level. You know, your Masters Super Pole winner last year up in Canada, engine right out of the box against the field of 40. Right. You know, we hear it all the time, and you just don't hear that, and therefore people are susceptible to some of the sales pitches. So that's really, I mean, through education, the engine's solid, the rule set's solid. People just have to understand what the sales pitches are. There's no credence to it.
Right. So what about your own interest, Dave? Do you get to drive much? I know you got to do a 206 Cup race a couple of years ago. Had any racing recently?
No, because I tore up my shoulder. So,
oh yeah,
as far as I can reach the shoulder up right now.
Yeah.
Tore my rotator cuff, and I have 3 screws holding my labrum tendon system. And I did that 2 years ago, and cortisone shots gave me about a year, and then it was time to just get it repaired.
Yeah.
So I've got to sit out this year, and I'll be right back at it.
I gotta do something with my shoulder too. And actually, Eric is our co-host who can't make it tonight, but I guess that's all 3 of us with shoulder problems. I don't know if it's a karting thing or what, but right now I'm just I've been nursing this thing for 3 months. I should probably go see somebody about it.
And what's funny, James, is you lift enough carts, and that's what ended up taking my shoulder to that last step. So
yeah, especially if it's stuck to the pavement and you know.
There you go.
Up. Yeah. So here's a question from Jordan Kosher. Any tips to working on the 206 compared to the World Formula engine? Oil changes, tuning, fuel, etc.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan, real easily, don't overthink the engine. I mean, a lot of people try to overthink the engine. In terms of oil, that's real simple. You use our Briggs Stratton 4T, and that's custom blended by AMSOIL. The bottom line is you've got automotive oils that aren't made for our type of system. They're made for a pressure loop system and lower operating temperatures. And they also don't have additive packages to prevent them from foaming at our RPM levels. So basically they accelerate damage and even worse. And then you have a lot of karting oils. I'll stay away from the names, but basically they're PAG based, which is a compressor lubricant and fuel coloring. And those at our operating temperatures literally end up vaporizing. And even worse is they're hygroscopic in nature. We just got an engine back, a 206 engine that put a rod through the front of the case. And I knew opening the case what we were going to find, and sure enough, the oil was contaminated with water. It was burned up from heat, and then it had so much water it was milk. So unfortunately, the right choice of oil will give you the best result. I think in terms of carburetor, if you're not going to run the engine between races for a while, make sure you flush it out, and also put a little WD-40 into the bowl just to prevent any oxidation and the like. Valve lash, 0 on the intake, 3 to 5 on the exhaust. That's going to be your sweet spot. In terms of top end, working on it and so forth, boy, usually after 24 hours of use, our engine's up in power, not down. So if you think about the average karting year being 20 hours, you can go a long time with our engine without having to do much to it. So keep it simple, and seat time, and also if the engine starts falling off after a season or two, I would look to probably do a valve job first. The exhaust valve probably has a little warpage at the seat, which will happen over time, but go right back out there.
Yeah, luckily there's not a whole lot that you need to do on a regular basis, which is nice. I got to be honest, I've neglected and beaten the crap out of my 206. I probably shouldn't do that, but that the reason I have it is because I don't have a lot of time to mess around with things. So that's kind of what happened. Though oil in there's a little old, but it is AMSOIL 4T, so I got that going for it. Richard Cordova, I don't know if you just joined the show, Richard, but he was talking about that folks are claiming that they found a way around the seals, And have you seen any evidence of this, Dave? And I think you hinted at maybe that there may be some changes coming to the SEAL program as well ahead of this.
Yeah, two things, Richard. We've heard of it through the grapevine, just like I see your statements made. I've yet to see it, have an example. The bottom line, and just to give everybody some peace of mind, let's put it in perspective. You get into the bottom end of the engine, and I was trying to make this statement earlier. The biggest advantage that somebody could do is take tension out of the rings. Otherwise they're putting the exact same cam into it, and we're controlling the bore and stroke. So two things. In tech, it's really easy. Push down the piston. You can compare it against a stock known Briggs Stratton short block. You would know that. But even the bigger picture is, you've got to think that in a senior class, we're engaging at 3,500 RPM and we're rev limited at 6,100 RPM. The engine's very well thought out. You've got a 2,600 RPM power band to work with. Across that power band, even if somebody did relieve the rings, you're never going to see it in terms of power until about 6,400. And your A to B acceleration, which we can measure in milliseconds, you can't even read. So, the seals are there for a quick check, but even if someone got into the bottom end of the engine, the ring tension can be checked from the top side very easily. And you can also measure the cam and bore and stroke. So that's why we have all those measurements and comparables in place. The seal, again, is your quick check. But you've got enough in place to make it very obvious if somebody tried to get into the bottom end. And then you mentioned the second part. The second part is later this year, you're going to see a new seal come out. And it's custom to our program. And what you'll see, what's going to be very unique about it is each engine is going to have its own serial number. It's also going to have the feature with the UPC code and number that you can plug into an app. And instead of having a paper build code for your engine, it's going to be all documented online. So when you, and there's several reasons. You go through tech. A tech official will be able to now pull the engine up, see what the original build is. If there's an issue with the engine, they're going to be able to put notes in and lock it in with the engine. So that way we don't have a racer that's cheated at one track going to another program and just causing trouble. It's kind of the scarlet letter that'll chase that engine around. And then in the used market, if someone wants to buy an engine, simply plug in the code and they can check to make sure that engine, get some history on that engine, when it was first raced and so forth. So there's going to be some documentation that goes along with that engine. So there's going to be a lot more robustness that will follow each engine going forward.
I like it. It'll be interesting. It's quite a bit of an undertaking too. I've got a tech background, and it'll be interesting to see how you guys do it. What's your loose timeline, you think, when that will be implemented, when that'll happen?
2 to 3 months.
Okay. And so people that have existing 206s with logbooks, will they also be able to begin tracking, or will it just be for production dates beyond the implementation?
This is going to be new engines coming out with the seal system.
Okay.
The seals that we have in place now are perfectly fine. We just want to bring that next step of technology in going forward.
Right. Yeah, just give that kind of the health.
Unlike what we have, James, where you could take a piece of paper out of the box, now we're going to have a way for that build information. It goes a step further. We're going to be able to eventually know what each side cover bolt torque was from the factory, head bolt torque. Everything's going to be marked against that engine. So the depth of information we're going to have will also allow us to talk to a customer in the field.
Great. Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to have that accountability and that timeline for the history of each engine. So that'll be pretty cool. So I'm going to change gears a little bit, and then we'll come back to a couple more audience questions before we run out of time here. But I want to talk about how folks come in a Briggs 206 engine. This Briggs 206 engine is brought to you by this guy over here and Briggs Racing. So thanks for donating this to the cause. And so at KartPulse, we're looking to move the website and pretty much our entire presence to the next level. We want to make a world-class website for kart racing, and we want to create world-class content along with that. But before we do that, we want to have a survey to really find out what people care about in kart racing and in the community. So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to start a survey, and participants in that survey who take the time to do it will be entered in the draw for various prizes. One of those prizes, again, thanks to Briggs Stratton Racing, is a 206. That's a pretty healthy prize. It's about $600, if not more, I think, David.
Correct.
So thanks for that. So more details on that as and when it comes. As I say, we've got a couple more exciting prizes in the loop, and then we'll be giving some KartPulse swag away as well. So look for that in the future. And let me see if we have another couple of questions here. We have lots of questions. Let me see. Pump gas. This is kind of a maintenance thing as well. Thomas Wishart. Pump gas with ethanol versus race fuel, or maybe we could slot marine gas, which is ethanol free as well. Should clubs spec fuel be non-ethanol to avoid carb damage or even help performance? I don't know if that's up to Briggs to decide what the club should use. I think, some clubs are they've got limited options, but what do you think, Dave?
I think you kind of hit it on the head. Thomas, I would love for us to get away from ethanol gas. It's probably the number one issue we have with our engine, and you mentioned it, carb damage. So, methanol is just nasty stuff to begin with. It reacts with just about every material out there. So, unfortunately, oxidation and so forth is especially when it's in a carburetor fuel passage that's internal, can be something that's just a nightmare. So, yeah, I would love to see clubs go to non-ethanol fuel, but it's not something that we can force. So it's up to each club. But if you can get your hands on it and a club can spec it, God bless.
Thanks for that. I'm trying to pull up another comment here, but I can't find it. So the gist of it was what's in store in the future of the 206 program, and I think it kind of tied in on the perspective of perhaps a faster engine package for those who were looking to go faster, but would still, like some of the benefits of the 206 package, where it's there's parity or more parity, should I say, a little bit easier to get going with. Anything in the pipeline for that at the moment?
I think there's always thought out there. James, we have to keep our focus on what we have. There's a lot of people depending on us for that as the program keeps growing. That said, the arsenal of tools at our disposal are there, and I'm not going to say we haven't tested going beyond, but at this point where we're at is a great place. And we simply don't want to lose focus.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea too, because as you say, it's easy to lose focus, and this formula, both in terms of its mechanical structure and in terms of your engineering processes, manufacturing processes, has demonstrated that it works. So to repeat that process is not necessarily going to be straightforward. You already know what it's going to take, but when you start adding more power into the equation, then that changes things a lot. So, that's not something I would envy. But
you've got our arsenal of components. I think people, we nitride our cams now. That'll give you some insight to where we're going. We've got a new forged rod in development that will first go in the world formula, but that allows us a lot of flexibility going forward. We're also working on some cylinder improvements that will keep going. So if we want to go to that next step, there's an expectation that the 206 has put out there, and we want to continue that. That next step, I talked about rings. Well, we're looking at different approaches to rings. If we are going to go to that next step, is that diamond plating? Is that, and I'll leave it at that. But we're always building our arsenal.
All right. So talk a little bit about Briggs 206 and Briggs Stratton Racing worldwide. We've had a couple of conversations about some beginnings of a program in Europe. I think it was adopted in Australia probably 2 years ago, maybe, or New Zealand. No offense to guys in the Southern Hemisphere when I get those two mixed up. But, I get language all the time. So, talk a little bit more about what's going on internationally as well, because obviously, Briggs Stratton is an American company, and the 206 program has been part of US karting now for 9, if not 10 years. Is that correct?
We're going on our 9th season.
9th season. Okay. So, talk more about that.
So I think the biggest program that's launching this year is with CRG in Italy, a national championship for the 206. And, James, it kind of comes down to this. Many of the Italian engine manufacturers have seen what the 206 has done for the sport here in the States and for their sales of 4-stroke chassis. And so, the same problems we have here with cost and complexity are some of the same problems anywhere in the world. So the 206 program in Italy has an incredible opportunity working with a partner like CRG to help rebuild the grassroots level of the sport in Europe. And so that's an exciting program. Australia adopted on a national level, New Zealand 3 years ago. We've got racing in Japan, Russia, so the Caribbean islands, which I hope to build so I can go.
Right.
Anyways, all over the country. Germany is starting, the Netherlands on a club level. So we've got a lot of enthusiasm internationally to help rebuild and fortify club levels. And that's really, what the program can help do. And if you look in the United States, obviously you see that with clubs that have built up around the program.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in Europe it might be, you're going to find it more challenging because 2-stroke is definitely more ingrained there. And for those who don't know and can't tell from my weird voice, I'm from Europe. When I first started having conversations with some of my friends and my kart racers back home, that was the thing, is that, 4-stroke, it's hugely successful in some areas. And then in other areas, 2-stroke is kind of the way, and there's really no knowledge of anything 4-cycle or 4-stroke related, as we say in Europe, which brings me to one of the comments that I see from John Clem here, where he talks about Margay's X2. And,
awesome.
Back 15, 20 years ago, one of our biggest classes was twin Honda GX 160s. 4-cycle, low maintenance. And, is there a place for that, do we think? With two engines, even though they're 206s, there's still more complexity, more sprockets, and other things to add there. But is that something that, Briggs are considering maybe, or that you guys are thinking of, or is this kind of mostly Margay's thing that they're experimenting right now?
No, we're supporting it. The time's here. In Europe, we've had twin engine programs forever. Australia, if you look at Tika, endurance twin engine sprint kart racing. So, in theory, you're talking a 9 horsepower engine times 2, you got 18 horsepower. We've been using twin engine karts in a lot of our testing for years. It's incredible. So no, there is a place for it, and a cost effective place for it. I think it's going to be great racing. So we're aboard. I'm going to get another one.
Yeah,
I'm going to get a twin engine kart.
Yeah, definitely a lot of fun. What I'd love to see come out of it too is see, just in general, more twin engine chassis come out of it. If it can make it more economical for Margay or any manufacturer to make twin chassis, we're going to see some pretty awesome karts coming out there. And then, have some faster 206s too. That's what we raced on road courses, was twin GX 160s. Similar concept, overhead valve, not as high maintenance, and a little bit easier to start than, a push start direct drive twin engine kart. So I think we're going to wrap it up. We're getting close on time. David, you have the mic. Is there anything that you'd like to wrap up with here?
I'm honestly still thinking about the twin engine kart. I'm going to go back and just say, you know, the best part about a twin engine kart is just how it handles. And also you would think the balance would be a question. It's not. And how much deeper you can brake going into a corner. I mean, it's just a beautiful piece. So I'm excited for that. As far as our program and what we're doing, you know, we're here for our racers. And at any time, you can reach out to us at briggsracing.com and drop us a question. You know, I want our racers to know what we're doing going forward. So we're going to bolster tech to help improve that at a track level. That you'll see. We've got a lot of articles that are in the works. I just have to final proof them to help people even further with the carburetor, simplify things. You want to know about valve lash? I've got an incredible study of valve lash, way over the top, but I want people to understand, you know, how valve lash works in our engine. Carburetor float setup. You know, again, it really comes down to, for the most part, not overthinking the product, but giving people more guts and knowledge and depth on what we have. So I want to take that what I want to say, pixie dust, and blow it away and make it more accessible. So that's it. Continuing to bolster our program, support our racers. We've got the 206, we've got the weekly racing series coming out. So if you go on our website, if you're a sprint track, sign up. We've got $45,000 in prizes to give away again this year. And yeah, we just want to thank our customers. Thanks for believing in us. You know, at the end of the day, it's so motivating, and you know, it's we take it so serious each and every day. This is what we do. There's nothing else that we do. So appreciate the support, and God bless.
Thanks. So while we're here it is on the KartPulse forums, of course. Margate,
love it.
X2. And yeah, I mean, Jules, they sound awesome. They handle great. And yeah, I love them. Like I say, if people start making more Jules chassis, we'll find some motors to stick on there.
Yeah, you see how the brakes center line and that rear axle,
yeah.
Totally different in how it brakes versus a single engine kart. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah,
they're fun. They're fun for sure.
They're a blast.
All right, well, let's wrap up the show. David, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And everybody at home, thanks for tuning in as well. We got more comments than I could have possibly cut up with, but we'll do our best after the show to kind of go through every one and try and answer any questions that we can. Of course, if you have questions, you can go to the forums. Lots of great people there to help you out, even Mr. Klaus here. We'll probably answer some of your questions too. Yeah, I got the funny dance finger thing going on. So thanks everybody for joining. Thanks again, David. I'll give you the gift of your time back for the evening here, because I know it's out of hours. All right, so take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Talk soon. Bye. And we'll do a little 5-second countdown here usually.